Hi, my name is Nora, and I'm 26 years old. If you had met me at my college graduation, you might have thought I was just another honors student walking the stage with a polite smile. But for me, that day was never just about a degree. It was the end of a silent war I had been fighting since childhood. I was born and raised in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Michigan, in a white two-story house that looked like a postcard from the outside, trimmed lawn, hanging flower baskets, and a picket fence that always needed repainting. But inside that picture-perfect home lived a family that never really saw me. Not fully. Not honestly. My parents, Mark and Linda, were both respectable professionals. My dad was a tax advisor, calm, logical, obsessed with numbers and return on investment. My mother taught high school literature, and while she quoted Shakespeare like gospel in class, she rarely spared any poetic kindness at home. I was their eldest child. But from as early as I can remember, it was clear that I was not their favorite. That honor belonged to my younger brother, Jake. 2 years younger. Effortlessly charming, with his shining smile and athletic trophies, he had the kind of presence that made everyone feel like he was destined for something great. And to my parents, he was
Me?
I was the independent one. The one who didn't need as much. Or so they claimed. On Christmas mornings, Jake would unwrap drones, gaming consoles, and limited edition sneakers while I got practical things, notebooks, clearance sweaters, or once even a beginner's ironing set. It's because you're mature, Mom would say sweetly. It's not about what's expensive. Jake just needs more encouragement, Dad would add. Even when I won school contests or brought home A-plus report cards, the praise would be lukewarm. Good job, Nora. Did you help Jake with his project yet? The only person who ever truly looked at me like I mattered was my grandmother, Gloria. Every summer, she'd invite me to her quiet lakeside cabin, where we'd sit on the porch drinking iced tea while I scribbled business ideas in old notebooks. You see the world differently, sweetheart, she'd whisper, gently touching my hand. Don't let them convince you you're anything less than extraordinary. It was in those summers that I began to quietly build my dream, not just to succeed, but to succeed loud enough that even the people who never believed in me would have no choice but to hear it. And soon, the chance to chase that dream finally came, when both Jake and I applied to college. And that was the beginning of everything. When senior year rolled around, both Jake and I applied to Westfield University, a prestigious school known for its competitive business and political science programs. He wanted to study politics. I aimed for the business track. I still remember the day the acceptance letters arrived. Jake and I got in on the same day. Same university. Same excitement. But the difference in how that moment was celebrated? It told me everything I had tried not to believe. I opened my letter first at the dinner table, heart pounding, hands trembling. I got in, I whispered. Dad glanced up from his phone. That's nice, Nora. That was it. No hug. No smile. No joy. Then the front door slammed open and Jake came rushing in, holding his envelope in the air like he had won a championship. I got into Westfield, he shouted. Within seconds, Dad leapt from his seat. Mom screamed with joy. Champagne was popped. Cider was poured. Jake was lifted into a celebration that felt like a coronation. And me? I sat quietly, still holding my letter, now feeling like a receipt for something they never planned to pay for. I swallowed it. Again. 2 weeks later, we were all seated together at the dinner table, a rare occasion where no phones were present. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was going to be the moment they acknowledged both of us equally. Instead, it was the night that changed everything. Dad cleared his throat, his fingers steepled in front of him. We need to talk about college plans, he began. But he looked only at Jake. We've been saving for your education since you were a kid, he said to him. The tuition at Westfield is steep, but we can cover it. You won't have to worry about a thing. Just focus on your future. Jake nodded, glowing with pride. I waited, and waited, until I finally asked the question that shattered my illusion. What about me? I said softly. The silence that followed was heavier than any slap. My father looked at me, eyes flat. Nora, we only have enough for one of you. Mom chimed in quickly, like it would soften the blow. Jake has always shown more promise in academics. And you've always been so independent, you can apply for loans or maybe consider a community college first. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The words, "he deserves it more than you," weren't said directly, not yet. But they were floating there in the air, loud enough to crush the part of me that still held out hope. I went to bed that night without finishing my meal. And for the first time in years, I cried, not because I was shocked, but because deep down, I already knew. This dinner just confirmed it. In my parents' eyes, Jake was an investment. I was an afterthought. But if they thought this would stop me, they didn't know who they were pushing away. The morning after that soul-crushing dinner, I woke up with puffy eyes and a decision I didn't know I was strong enough to make. I was going to Westfield anyway, with or without their help. While Jake basked in congratulations and planned his dorm setup with mom and dad, I sat at my desk with a half-functioning laptop and opened a new spreadsheet titled Plan B, Nora's Education. I started applying to every scholarship, grant, and financial aid option I could find. Big ones, small ones, essay-based, need-based. I spent hours every night writing personal statements, tweaking answers, and praying something would stick. My high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Harper, noticed I was always the last to leave the computer lab. One afternoon, she approached me gently. "I read your essay for the Urban Scholars Grant," she said. It was powerful. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Let's apply for 10 more," she added with a smile. Together, we applied for 25 scholarships. I got 6. Not enough, but it was something. The rest I covered through federal loans, a small private loan co-signed by Grandma Gloria, and savings from working at a coffee shop since junior year. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't secure. But it was mine. Jake got a send-off party with balloons, catered food, and a professionally packed SUV. I packed secondhand suitcases I found at a thrift store and loaded my decade-old Honda with boxes I labeled in Sharpie. The night before move-in, my mom knocked on my door awkwardly. "I found some old twin sheets you can use," she said, holding out a faded floral set. "They're clean." I took them. I said thank you. But my heart didn't move. Jake moved into a premium dorm, just minutes from his lecture halls. I found a low-rent apartment 45 minutes from campus with 3 strangers I met through a university housing forum. The plumbing groaned. The walls were thin. But it was mine. I got a part-time job at a local coffee shop near campus and secured weekend shifts at a used bookstore. My schedule? Wake up at 5 a.m. Study. Work. Attend classes. Work again. Study. Sleep at 1 a.m. Repeat. Meanwhile, Jake sent Snapchats of dorm parties, game nights, and his new political science group. My parents called him twice a week. I got texts only on holidays. But even as I stood alone at the bottom of that mountain, one thought kept pushing me forward. This is the part of the story they'll regret missing. And I meant every word of it. College hit like a freight train. While most students were still learning to set alarms and find their lecture halls, I was balancing 30 hours of work each week, a full course load, and keeping track of how many meals I could skip to afford a textbook. I'd wake up before sunrise, squeeze in 2 hours of reading, rush to the coffee shop for the opening shift, attend back-to-back business classes, grab a sandwich if I was lucky, then head to the bookstore until close. Most nights, I collapsed into bed after midnight with aching feet and a spinning head. And still, I kept up my grades. In fact, I was doing better than most students. My real-life budgeting, time management, and work ethic made me a quiet force in every class. While others struggled with case studies, I lived them. One professor noticed, Professor Clark, who taught business ethics. After a presentation on resource allocation, she stopped me outside class. "Nora, your insight on small business survival? Remarkable. You think like someone who's already run one." Those words planted a seed. That night, I opened an old notebook, one I had carried since those summers at Grandma Gloria's, and flipped to a page titled, Business Ideas That Might Actually Work. Within weeks, between classes and double shifts, I started building something small. An online virtual assistant service for local businesses that couldn't afford full-time help. It was scrappy. No funding. No fancy software. Just me, my laptop, and a basic website I built myself. And somehow it started working. While that gave me purpose, I was also breaking, emotionally, mentally, physically. That's when I met Bella, my roommate. We weren't close at first. She was pre-law, energetic, and always baking something that smelled better than anything I could afford. One night, I came home after a 14-hour stretch and found a sticky note on the fridge. "Nora, this soup is for you." And yes, I used fresh herbs. Bella. It made me cry more than I'd like to admit. Bella didn't ask questions right away. She just watched, noticed, and after a while, she began helping in quiet but profound ways. She edited my essays when I was too tired to think. She blocked off study time on our shared calendar so the other roommates wouldn't bother me. She cooked extra food and left it labeled for me in the fridge. She listened when I broke down quietly on a Tuesday night, whispering, "I don't think I can do this anymore." And when I confessed how my family had cut me off, how I was doing this all alone, she said one thing that cemented our friendship forever. "Blood makes you related, but support? That makes you family. And you've got me now." That night, for the first time in months, I slept without setting an alarm because someone else cared whether I made it through the week. Bella was the first piece of the family I chose for myself. And together, we would survive what came next, including the crisis that nearly made me quit. By sophomore year, my business had gained traction. I'd landed 5 recurring clients, all small local shops or solo entrepreneurs who needed digital help but couldn't afford traditional agencies. I'd type up invoices on my lunch break, send social media reports at midnight, and take calls in storage rooms between shifts. I was tired, always. But I was also building something real. Something mine. At school, my name started popping up in small ways. Professor Clark recommended me for a university-wide panel on student entrepreneurship. My counselor, Mrs. Harper, nominated me for a business department spotlight. One day, she even surprised me with a $1,000 grant raised by faculty donations. "We see you," she said simply. That one sentence made up for 1,000 things my parents never said. Meanwhile, Jake, my brother, started unraveling. The political science courses that once seemed tailor-made for him started demanding more than charm. His grades slipped. He missed deadlines. Professors stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. One rainy evening, while I was editing a client's website with a mug of cold tea beside me, I heard a knock at my apartment door. It was Jake, soaked, shaking, and holding a laptop. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. He looked smaller than I remembered. More human. "I'm failing my senior thesis," he confessed. "Professor Goldstein says my research is a mess. I have 3 weeks to restructure everything, or I won't graduate." For a long second, I didn't move. A part of me, the angry, bruised part, wanted to tell him to figure it out on his own, the way I always had. But another part remembered what it felt like to have no one. "Come in," I said. We sat side by side at my tiny kitchen table while I walked him through proper citations, research framing, and methodology. We worked for hours. And days. And slowly, Jake started opening up. "You do all this and run a business?" he asked, glancing at my color-coded planner. I nodded. "But how?" I looked at him and said, "Because I had to." He grew quiet, then whispered, "Mom and Dad said you were doing fine." I didn't know it was like this. Would it have mattered? I asked, honestly. Would they have suddenly believed I was worth investing in too? Jake didn't answer. But the look in his eyes told me he finally saw it. The years of silence, the exhaustion, the quiet strength no one ever acknowledged. For the first time in our lives, we stopped being the chosen one and the forgotten one. We were just brother and sister, sitting across from each other, finally telling the truth. By the end of the semester, Jake passed his thesis. He credited me in his acknowledgments, the first time my name had ever appeared in anything connected to our family's pride. It wasn't a full redemption, but it was a start. Graduation morning arrived with a sky so bright it felt like the universe itself had shown up to celebrate. I stood in front of the mirror in my tiny apartment, Adjusting the graduation stole Grandma Gloria had embroidered for me. On it, in delicate silver thread, were the words she always whispered into my soul. Diamonds are made under pressure. This wasn't just a degree. This was the visible proof that I had survived. Downstairs, Bella was waiting, already dressed up and holding a cup of coffee like a proud big sister. "Your chariot awaits, boss lady," she joked, dangling her car keys. We laughed, but her eyes shone with pride. As we arrived on campus, a crowd of black gowns and camera flashes filled the university grounds. Families milled about, snapping photos, straightening ties, adjusting mortarboards. I spotted Jake across the quad, his blonde hair still a mess, his robe wrinkled, but his smile genuine. He rushed over. "Hey, you look important." I grinned. "I am." We lined up alphabetically. My hands shook slightly, not from nerves, but from anticipation. They didn't know what was coming. The ceremony began with the usual. Welcoming speeches, honor rolls, the president talking about leadership in the future. Then came the conferral of degrees. When my name was called, Nora Wilson, School of Business, I walked across that stage with my head high and my eyes locked on two people sitting front row. My parents, Mark and Linda. They clapped. Politely. Uncertainly. They had no idea what was coming next. After all degrees were awarded, President Harlow returned to the mic. "Before we conclude," he said, "we have a very special address." He paused for effect. "The business department has selected one of our most outstanding graduates to represent the class of 20XX. Please welcome Nora Wilson." There was a murmur in the audience. I stood. My parents looked stunned. As I walked to the podium, the words I had rehearsed 100 times began rising in my chest, but I wasn't nervous. I was ready. "Good morning," I began. "My name is Nora Wilson. 4 years ago, I arrived here with nothing but a stack of scholarship papers, 2 part-time jobs, and a heart full of quiet determination. I worked 30 hours a week while maintaining a full academic load. I built a business from my dorm. I skipped meals to afford books. I said no to parties and yes to possibilities. And I did it without family funding, without a safety net, and without the belief of the people who were supposed to believe in me the most." There was a sharp intake of breath from the front row. I didn't name them. I didn't have to. "I stand here not just with honors," I continued, "but with proof that the value placed on you by others doesn't define your worth. Your drive does. Your belief in yourself does. Your courage to move forward, even when no one claps, does." When I stepped back from the podium, the room was silent for one perfect moment. Then the audience erupted in applause. A standing ovation. My classmates stood. My professor stood. Even Jake stood. But not my parents. They just sat there, still, pale, and stunned. The truth had finally been spoken, and this time the whole world heard it. That evening, I arrived, reluctantly, at the post-graduation family dinner held at a rented house just outside campus. The one my parents arranged mostly for Jake. I had received an invitation, but it was obvious. I was a formality, an afterthought. Again. But this time, I came with a different presence. Not desperate. Not quiet. Just done pretending. As I stepped inside, relatives turned toward me. This time, not with pity or forced smiles, but with surprise and respect. "Aren't you the one who gave that incredible speech today? I heard you built a business while working 2 jobs. Girl, you're going places." Their praise was warm, genuine, and every word made my parents shift uncomfortably at the center of the room. I spotted Jake already seated at the dinner table, gesturing me over with a grin. Grandma Gloria sat beside him, glowing with pride, a sparkle in her eye that only I could recognize. Dinner was served. Conversations began, until my Uncle Ryan, Mom's brother, raised his glass and said loudly, "Let's give a real toast. Not just to Jake, but to Nora. Because not only did she graduate, she built a business, funded herself, gave the most powerful speech of the day. Honestly, I think we've all been underestimating her." My father, Mark, chuckled stiffly. Well, Nora's always been too resourceful. Resourceful? Uncle Ryan raised an eyebrow. She was abandoned, Mark, and still outperformed half the class. That's not resourcefulness. That's resilience. The table fell silent. My mother, Linda, set down her wine glass slowly. We made difficult decisions. We thought Jake needed the help more, she said, her voice low. Then why didn't you ever show up for anything she achieved? Grandma Gloria asked sharply. Not one award. Not one semester celebration. Not even a phone call. I wasn't trying to hurt her, Mom replied, her voice now shaking. I just thought she didn't need us. I looked up. Calmly. Firmly. No. You didn't think about me at all. A hush fell over the room. You called me independent, I continued. But what you really meant was that you didn't want to be bothered. You gave everything to Jake because he was easier to brag about. Because he fit your version of success. But I earned mine without shortcuts, and now that the world finally noticed, you're embarrassed, not proud. Dad's jaw clenched. This isn't the time for. Actually, Jake interrupted. It is. He turned toward them, his voice steady. You told me Nora would be fine, that she didn't need anything. But she needed you. And you weren't there. You never were. Mom opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Jake kept going. You celebrated me for doing half the work she did. You rewarded mediocrity and ignored greatness just because it didn't come in the package you expected. That's not parenting. That's bias. Tears welled in Linda's eyes. But whether it was guilt or discomfort, I couldn't tell. Dad looked like he wanted to leave. But now, the entire table was watching, and for once, they weren't on his side. Uncle Ryan said softly, You may not have supported her then, but the rest of us will now. I stood up, smiled faintly. Thank you. But I don't need validation anymore. Not from anyone who only looks when the crowd starts clapping. I turned toward Grandma Gloria. Would you like to come with me? Bella's waiting. We're having a real celebration with the people who saw me long before the spotlight did. She rose immediately. I was hoping you'd ask. Jake followed. Wait up. I'm not staying here either. And as we walked out together, me, my grandmother, and the brother who finally understood, we left Mark and Linda sitting alone at the end of their own dinner, surrounded by people who had finally stopped nodding along. They hadn't just lost control. They had lost me. In the weeks after graduation, the dust began to settle, but my world was only just beginning. I moved into a bright, one-bedroom apartment near downtown. Not luxury, but light streamed in through tall windows, and for the first time, I had space that was completely mine. The startup I had once built from my laptop was now a registered agency with part-time student interns, paid, supported, mentored. And in July, I received the official offer letter from a rising tech startup I had admired since undergrad. They weren't just hiring me, they were making me their marketing director. 6 figures. Health benefits. Stock options. My name on the leadership page of their website. I didn't cry when I got the email. I just sat there, still, letting the quiet pride settle over me like sunlight after a long storm. Bella threw me a celebration dinner at our favorite Thai place. Jake brought flowers and toasted me with sparkling water. Grandma Gloria gifted me a silver bracelet that once belonged to her mother, whispering, Now it's yours, because you earned everything they said you couldn't. My parents did reach out eventually. A hesitant Sunday lunch. An apology couched in phrases like, We misjudged things, and you've really proven yourself. I didn't yell. I didn't even argue. I simply said, I'm open to something new, but it will be on my terms now. And it won't erase the past. It'll only move forward if it's honest. That seemed to stun them more than any speech ever could. We now speak occasionally, but I no longer wait for their validation, and I never will again, because I built a life without them. And now I fund a scholarship at Westfield for students like me, the ones who are told they're fine on their own, when in truth, they're just silently surviving. The first recipient was a young woman working nights, raising her little brother and maintaining a 3.9 GPA. When I met her, she said, Thank you for seeing someone like me. I smiled and told her the truth. I was you. Jake now works with a nonprofit focused on academic equity, a surprising but beautiful turn in his journey. He's found purpose beyond applause, and we're closer than we've ever been. And Bella? Still in my life, still my chosen sister, and now co-founder of a second venture we're launching next year. As for Grandma Gloria, she remains the anchor of everything I am. We spend weekends at her lake cabin, where I first learned to dream. Looking back, I don't regret the pain, because pain taught me how to rise. The girl they dismissed became the woman they couldn't ignore, and the woman they ignored became the one who outgrew them entirely. So to anyone reading this, anyone who's been underestimated, overlooked, or left behind, you are not a mistake. You are a masterpiece in progress. And no one's failure to see your worth can stop you from becoming everything you're meant to be. I'm Nora. I'm 26. And I built my life, not from their support, but from their silence. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you weren't worth the investment, let this story be a reminder. You are not defined by who doubted you. You are defined by who you became despite them. Nora didn't just survive, she rose. She turned silence into strength, rejection into resilience, and built a future louder than their doubt could ever silence. And if she could do it alone, you can too. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, sometimes the people who believe in you the least end up being the reason you believe in yourself the most. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.